In 2009, a 34-year-old warehouse worker in Dayton, Ohio named Marcus Webb received a letter from his late father's attorney. It came on an ordinary Tuesday, mixed in with bills and grocery store flyers, the kind of mail you almost throw away without looking. Inside was a single piece of paper. A brokerage account statement. He didn't understand the columns, the fund names, or the ticker symbols. None of it meant anything to a man who had never owned a stock in his life. The only number that caught his eye, a cash settlement line at the bottom, read 200 to Marcus. That letter meant nothing. He was a working man. Rent was due on the 1st. Groceries needed buying. His truck needed an oil change he kept putting off. He didn't have the time, or the energy, to figure out what a brokerage account even was, let alone why his father had one. So he did what most of us do when something feels complicated and unimportant at the same time. He pushed it aside. Told himself he'd deal with it later, when things calmed down. But things rarely calm down when you're working paycheck to paycheck. That drawer closed. And 14 years of silence began, 14 years that would matter more than Marcus could possibly have imagined. And $14. $214. Barely enough to cover a car repair. He laughed, folded it, tossed it in a kitchen drawer, and forgot about it completely.
To understand what was sitting in that account, you have to understand who Gerald Webb was. Gerald worked 2 jobs his entire adult life. A night shift at a printing press that started at 11 p.m. and ended just as the sun came up, and Saturdays at a hardware store stocking shelves and helping customers find the right size bolt. He never went on vacation, never bought a new car. He drove a 1991 Ford F-150 with a cracked windshield until the day he died. Because in his mind, a working truck was a working truck, no matter how it looked. Gerald was not a wealthy man by any measure his neighbors would have recognized. He was not a financial expert. He had no portfolio strategy, no advisor, no Bloomberg terminal, no subscription to any financial newsletter. What Gerald had was something far rarer than money. He had discipline. Quiet, private, unshakable discipline, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind nobody throws a parade for. Starting in 1987, Gerald did something small. Something almost embarrassingly simple. Every single month, without fail, he transferred $150 into a basic S&P 500 index fund. That was the entire strategy. No research, no timing the market, no hot tips from a coworker, no chasing whatever stock was hot that year. Just $150 every month, automatically, like clockwork, rain or shine, raise or layoff scare, good years and hard years alike. He never told Marcus, never mentioned it at Sunday dinner. Never brought it up once in 34 years of being a father. It wasn't a secret in the dramatic sense. He simply didn't think it was worth mentioning. To Gerald, it was just what you did with money you didn't need yet. It was his quiet gift to a son who didn't yet know he needed it. Month after month, year after year, through good times and bad, Gerald kept going for 22 consecutive years. Let's talk about what those 22 years actually looked like in real numbers, because the math here is the entire point of this story. $150 a month works out to $1,800 a year. Over 22 years, Gerald contributed roughly $39,600 total out of his own pocket. Less than $40,000, earned one night shift and one Saturday at a time. But here's what makes the S&P 500 different from a savings account. It doesn't just hold your money. It grows it, compounds it. It multiplies it year after year, often when you're not even watching. By the time Gerald passed away in 2009, that $39,600 had quietly, invisibly become approximately $145,000. Nearly 4 times what he had put in. And his son, sorting through paperwork after the funeral, had absolutely no idea. When Gerald died in 2009, Marcus grieved the way any son grieves the loss of his father. The loss of a parent is not something you measure in dollars, and in that moment, money was the last thing on his mind. He inherited the account along with a stack of other paperwork, insurance forms, a small life insurance payout, instructions for the truck title. He received the letter, saw the number $214, and assumed it was insignificant compared to everything else he was dealing with. He told himself he would look into it later, once the funeral arrangements were settled, once the house was cleared out, once life slowed down enough to think straight. But grief has a way of burying things, both literally and figuratively, and later never came. The account sat, untouched, unmanaged, completely forgotten in the chaos of loss. For the next 14 years, Marcus kept working. Same warehouse, same hours, same uniform, same fluorescent lights humming overhead every shift. He stressed about rent every single month. He skipped dentist appointments he genuinely needed because the copay felt like too much. He ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch, sometimes for dinner too, to stretch his paycheck all the way to the end of the month. There were nights he sat in his car in the parking lot, checking his bank balance on his phone, feeling that familiar tightening in his chest, that quiet desperation that millions of working Americans know by heart, the kind that doesn't show up in any economic report but shapes every single decision you make. Meanwhile, 40 miles away, in a server room at Vanguard that Marcus would never see or think about, his father's account was doing something extraordinary. It was growing, silently, steadily, relentlessly, without him, without anyone watching, just growing day after day, completely indifferent to the fact that the man it belonged to was struggling to make rent. From 2009 to 2023, the United States stock market experienced one of the greatest bull runs in its entire history. The S&P 500 rose from roughly 900 points in the depths of the financial crisis to over 4,500 points, more than 5 times over. This wasn't a fluke or a single lucky stretch. It was recovery after recovery, year after year of growth, interrupted by occasional dips that, in hindsight, were simply buying opportunities nobody recognized in the moment. Every dollar left untouched in that market during those 14 years didn't just survive the ups and downs, it multiplied through them. $145,000, compounding at an average annual return of nearly 15% across that specific window, slowly became $1,112,047. Let that sink in for a second. The math is real. Then one ordinary afternoon in 2023, Marcus's phone rang during his lunch break. It was a representative from Vanguard. The account, the system flagged, had been completely dormant for over a decade. Standard procedure kicks in for accounts with no activity over an extended period, regardless of size. An advisor named Sandra reached out, not with urgency, just as a courtesy call, simply to confirm the account holder was still reachable and the contact information on file was current. Marcus almost didn't answer. He didn't recognize the number, and in his experience, unknown numbers usually meant telemarketers or scams. He almost let it go to voicemail like he always did. But something he still can't fully explain what made him pick up that day. Sandra introduced herself, explained the situation calmly, mentioned his father's name, mentioned the account number, and then she asked the question that would change everything. Had he logged in recently to check the balance? He hadn't. Not once. Not in 14 years. That evening, after his shift ended, Marcus sat down at his kitchen table with an old laptop that barely still worked. Sandra had patiently walked him through resetting his login credentials over the phone, spelling out each step twice. His hands were shaking slightly as he typed, not from excitement exactly, more from the strange anxiety of opening something he'd avoided for so long. He genuinely didn't know what to expect. Maybe a few $1,000s. Maybe enough to finally fix the check engine light that had been on for years. The page loaded slower than he wanted it to, the little spinning wheel turning while his heart pounded. And then, all at once, the numbers appeared. $1,112,047. He read it again, certain he'd misread a decimal point somewhere. And then again, certain it had to be someone else's account. And then Marcus Webb, a warehouse worker from Dayton, Ohio who had been counting pennies that same week, slid slowly off his kitchen chair and sat down hard on the floor. He just sat there, staring at the ceiling, laptop glowing above him, in complete and total silence. He called his sister immediately. She answered on the second ring, half expecting bad news, the way you do when your brother calls you out of nowhere on a weeknight. He couldn't speak at first, just breathing hard, and then crying, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and unexpected. She thought genuinely that someone had died. "Marcus, what happened?" Talk to me. What happened? Her voice was already shaking. He finally found the words, stumbling through the number. And when he told her, she didn't believe him. Made him say it 3 separate times, slowly, like she was double-checking each digit against something in her head. They stayed on the phone for nearly 2 hours that night, crying, laughing, and remembering their father in a way they hadn't in years. Gerald never got to see this moment. He never got to see what his quiet decision built. But in the most real way possible, sitting on that kitchen floor with his sister on the line, Gerald was still taking care of his children, 14 years after he was gone. The next morning, Marcus went to work, because what else was there to do? Same warehouse, same uniform, same fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. And somewhere between the loading dock and aisle 7, pushing the same cart he'd pushed 1,000 times before, it hit him fully for the first time. For 14 years, while he skipped meals to stretch a paycheck, while he worried whether he could afford a doctor's visit for a persistent cough, while he drove a truck with a check engine light that had been glowing since 2016, there was $1 million sitting in an account with his name already on it. Not hidden, not locked away by some bureaucratic trick. Just sitting there, growing, waiting for him to simply look. He did not need to suffer through any of those years the way he did. He just did.